In a forgotten corner of town, under flickering lights and the scent of engine grease, a broken mechanic named Ethan toils through another late night, unaware that fate is about to knock, driving $1 million Ferrari, when a mysterious woman soaked in rain and fury crashes into his garage demanding help. Ethan doesn't realize he's staring down the hood at Cassandra Vale, tech billionaire, CEO, and soon-to-be dethroned icon. What starts as a routine fix becomes a heart-pounding turning point when Ethan uncovers more than engine trouble. Cassandra is on the run from her own empire, caught in a hostile boardroom coup. But Cassandra sees something in Ethan, the brilliance he left buried under rust and regret. As sparks fly in the shop, and between them, she makes him an offer no one else ever did: a second chance. From busted bolts to billion-dollar tech, this is the unlikely story of how a forgotten genius and a ruthless tycoon rewrote their destinies. One fixed her car, the other fixed his purpose. Together they built something no one saw coming. The rain had been relentless for hours, hammering the corrugated metal roof of Ethan Hayes' garage like an angry drummer. Each drop echoed through the nearly empty space, where only the occasional clang of a wrench or the sputter of a tired fluorescent light broke the stillness. The shop smelled of oil, rubber, and rust, an honest scent, if a rough one. Ethan was used to silence. Ever since the auto shop became more of a personal sanctuary than a profitable business, customers came sporadically. He didn't mind. The quiet suited him. It kept the past buried. He wiped his hands on a tattered rag, eyes scanning the old wall clock. 8:47 p.m., almost time to lock up. He flipped the switch on the portable heater under his workbench and sighed. Another quiet, uneventful night. A sound like a beast in pain pierced the air, followed by a violent rattle and a deep metallic groan. Ethan instinctively ducked, heart jumping into his throat. Tires slid against wet pavement outside, then came to an abrupt, jerky stop. Ethan grabbed a flashlight and hurried to the wide-open front of the garage. Headlights cut through the downpour like white knives. A red blur slowly came into view. It wasn't just any car. It was a Ferrari, blood red, sleek, angry-looking, even sitting still. Steam hissed from under the hood, mixing with the rain in thick plumes. The front bumper looked scratched, and the engine made a pitiful whimper before going dead entirely. The driver's door flew open. A woman stepped out, tall, confident, and infuriated. She wore a sharp crimson trench coat that clung to her like wet paint, heels that clicked against the concrete even through puddles, and eyes that could freeze fire. Her soaked hair clung to her cheekbones, but she didn't brush it away. She was all presence, commanding, fierce. Ethan blinked once, twice. She didn't belong here, not in this part of town, not in his garage. "You the mechanic?" she asked, voice cutting through the rain like glass. He raised an eyebrow. "I'm the janitor on weekends, too." She didn't smile, didn't even blink. "My engine's dead. Fix it." Ethan stepped closer, careful but curious. "You blew a V12 engine in a Ferrari on a wet night and ended up here? Must have taken a wrong turn." She crossed her arms, unimpressed. "I don't have time for small talk. Can you fix it or not?" There was something in her voice, urgent, sure, but also shaken, like she was holding herself together with sheer will, not fear exactly, more like desperation buried under layers of control. He squinted at the car. "Engine steaming. That's not just a misfire. Could be the radiator, maybe a blown valve. I'll need to get under the hood." "You have 15 minutes. Lady, it takes me 15 minutes just to warm up the coffee machine. Now she blinked, slowly. I'll pay you triple your rate. He snorted. You don't even know what my rate is. She took a step forward, rain soaking her shoulders, but she didn't seem to care. Name it. Ethan stared at her, really started. There was something familiar about her sharp features, something he'd seen once before in a news article or magazine cover, but he couldn't quite place it. Instead, he looked past her to the gleaming badge on the Ferrari, the faint scent of burning oil, and the puddle forming beneath the chassis. I'll take a look, he said finally, but no promises. He led her inside as the storm grew heavier, thunder rumbling in the distance. She followed, silent as a shadow, dripping on his concrete floor like a specter from another world. As the garage door creaked shut behind them, sealing off the storm, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that something larger had just rolled into his life than a busted supercar. He wasn't wrong. The next few hours and the woman in the red trench coat were about to change everything. The garage lights buzzed to life overhead, casting a harsh glow on the glistening Ferrari and the dripping woman beside it. Ethan tossed the soaked rag onto his workbench and gave the car a quick once-over. Water streamed down the hood, and steam still hissed faintly from beneath it. You want to pop the hood? He asked, without looking at her. She didn't move. He turned to find her surveying the space like she'd stepped into an alien world. Her gaze lingered on the chipped paint, the wall of scattered tools, the battered leather couch in the corner. It was clear she had never stepped foot in a place like this before. Still, she said nothing, just walked over to the driver's side and pressed the hood release with an elegant flick. Ethan raised the hood and let out a low whistle. You weren't kidding, this thing's been driven hard. I didn't come here for a lecture, she replied curtly. I'm not giving one, Ethan shot back, pulling on gloves. Just telling you what I see. She folded her arms. You always this chatty with customers? He shrugged. You're my first Ferrari this year. It's an occasion. She arched an eyebrow. You don't get many high-profile clients. Not since the mayor's nephew drove his dad's Range Rover into a ditch, Ethan replied, cracking a smile. That was the highlight of last summer. No reaction. He crouched under the hood and started inspecting the engine bay, his hands moving with practiced ease. Mind telling me your name, or should I keep calling you Lady? There was a long pause before she answered. Cassandra Vale. The wrench in Ethan's hand stopped mid-turn. Cassandra Vale? The Cassandra Vale, CEO of Vale Systems, face of 3 Fortune covers in the last 5 years, a woman whispered about in venture capital circles like a ghost story. Ambitious, ruthless, brilliant. He stood slowly, dusting off his hands. The Cassandra Vale. Her jaw tightened. I was hoping that wouldn't matter. Well, he said, gesturing to the luxury car behind her, you kind of gave yourself away. Her shoulders slumped, just a fraction, but enough to suggest exhaustion behind the polished exterior. Look, I'm not here to be recognized. My car broke down. I need it fixed, that's all. Ethan studied her again, this time more carefully. Her eyes looked sharper than they had at first, calculating, maybe even wary, not just of him, but of everything, as if she expected the walls to betray her. Fine, he said, nodding. You're a customer. I'm a mechanic. Let's keep it simple. She relaxed slightly. That's all I want. Ethan turned back to the engine. So what were you doing in this part of town anyway? Not exactly your usual zip code. I was driving, she said vaguely. Driving a $200,000 car in a thunderstorm? I needed space to think. Ethan chuckled. Expensive therapy. Silence stretched between them for a few beats. The storm outside beat harder against the roof, thunder rolling again like distant drums. He didn't ask more questions, not yet, but he could tell something was off. No security detail, no assistant, just one of the most powerful women in America, alone in the rain, with a blown engine and secrets written all over her face. He kept his eyes on the work, but his mind raced. This was no random breakdown. Something was coming. Ethan rolled his tool cart closer to the Ferrari and lifted the hood fully. The heat from the engine was still rolling off in waves, mingling with the musty chill in the garage. He grabbed a flashlight and began probing deeper, checking the belts, the coolant lines, the exhaust manifold. "You overheated it," he said without looking up. Cassandra stood just behind him, arms still crossed. "I noticed." He smirked. "You redlined in fourth, didn't you?" "I was going over 120, maybe more." He paused. "Trying to outrun something?" She didn't answer, but the silence said enough. He moved around to the other side, lowering himself to the floor to check under the car. Cassandra's heels clicked as she paced behind him, her every step a reminder of her world. Designer, deliberate, and usually in control. "I assume you know how to drive a car like this," Ethan said, voice muffled. "I built the company that made its software," she replied, almost defensively. Ethan chuckled. "So you broke your own tech?" She walked away, clearly annoyed, and stared at a faded photograph taped to the wall. A younger Ethan in a white lab coat grinning beside what looked like a robotic prototype. It looked advanced. "You were an engineer," she said. "Once," Ethan replied, standing again and wiping his hands. "What happened?" He glanced at the photo, then at her. "Let's just say I didn't like the people who ran the company, and they didn't like someone who questioned them." "Ah," she said with a knowing look, "the idealist." He nodded. "Better than being a corporate assassin." Cassandra raised an eyebrow. "Who says I'm not both?" They stared at each other for a moment, tension sharp enough to slice through the storm. Then Ethan turned away. "Coolant pumps shot, probably a blown gasket too. I'll need at least an hour, maybe more." She exhaled and sat down on the worn couch in the corner, for the first time seeming to let the exhaustion in her bones show. "Do you want coffee?" Ethan asked, half sincere. "I want to wake up and find that this day never happened." He looked at her, and for the first time her eyes weren't steel, they were glass. Cracked, vulnerable. "Yeah," he said softly, "I've had a few days like that too." The rain slowed outside, becoming a steady rhythm instead of a roar. Inside the garage, Ethan worked under the hood, sleeves rolled up, grease on his knuckles and sweat on his brow. Cassandra watched him from the couch. Her eyes traced the methodical movements of his hands, the way he handled tools like extensions of himself, not as accessories. There was grace in the way he moved, unpretentious mastery. She had hired armies of engineers, overseen product lines worth billions, but none of them had that kind of intimacy with their work. "What's that?" she asked, pointing toward the shelf beside the workbench. Ethan glanced over. "Which part?" "That robotic hand." "Oh, just a side project. Started it a while ago, never finished." She stood and walked over to it, picking up the small, articulated device. It was skeletal, but the joints moved fluidly. She turned it over in her hand, impressed. "This is incredible," she murmured. "Where did you learn to design something like this?" Ethan wiped his hands. "Before I ended up here, I led R&D at a startup. We were doing fine motor robotics for prosthetics." "Why'd you leave?" "They wanted to pivot to defense contracts. Build drones instead of hands. He looked away. I wanted to build things that helped people. Cassandra set the hand down, more carefully this time. You still could. He raised an eyebrow. In this garage? She hesitated, then locked eyes with him. Maybe not here, but somewhere. There was a long silence. For the first time, Cassandra Vale didn't look like a billionaire. She looked like a woman staring at a mirror, seeing something she'd forgotten she needed. A mechanic, an engineer, a chance. Neither of them realized it yet, but a new engine had just started turning deep inside both of them. The clock on the garage wall ticked toward 10 p.m. The storm had softened to a drizzle, but thunder still echoed in the distance like a reminder of what lingered on the horizon. Ethan worked quietly, tightening bolts and replacing a coolant hose, while Cassandra sat across the room with her arms crossed. She hadn't touched her phone since arriving until it rang. The tone was discreet but sharp. Cassandra's hand darted into her coat pocket. She glanced at the screen. A number labeled Priority Vale Board blinked red. She answered without a word, turning her back to Ethan. He tried not to eavesdrop, but her voice carried just enough. I'm handling it. No, I don't care what Mason said. He doesn't call a vote without a full board consensus. It's not his company. I built it from the ground up. Yes, I'm off-grid. No, that doesn't mean I'm out. She paced in tight circles, voice low but urgent. I'll be back by morning. You delay them, or I swear... The line cut. She exhaled sharply, her shoulders stiff with fury. Ethan stood beside the car, pretending to focus on his work. Boardroom politics. She looked up startled, then scoffed. You really do hear everything. Thin walls, he replied, and you're not exactly whispering. She hesitated, then leaned against the wall, suddenly tired again. They're trying to vote me out. My COO's orchestrating a hostile takeover while I'm off the grid. He whistled. Sounds like a fun Tuesday. She ignored the sarcasm. I built Vale systems from a dorm room. I coded our first neural net prototype on 3 hours of sleep a night and no heat in the winter. Now they want to remove me because I had the audacity to disagree. With what? With selling to a defense conglomerate. Ethan looked up. And here I thought we were total opposites, he said. Cassandra cracked a bitter smile. Maybe we're more alike than I want to admit. A pause. You didn't run away, he added, nodding to her car. You were escaping. She straightened. It's not over. No, Ethan agreed, but running on a blown gasket was never going to get you far. She stared at him for a long time. You fix engines, she said softly. What about companies? Ethan gave a half smile. You'd be surprised how similar they are. After the phone call, Cassandra grew quieter, thoughtful. She walked the perimeter of the garage as Ethan worked, eyes scanning everything with a precision that betrayed the tech visionary within. Her gaze stopped once more at the robotic hand. You said this was a side project, she began, walking over. But this kind of motion control requires high-level programming. This is your design? All mine, Ethan replied, adjusting a socket wrench. Hardware, firmware, actuator logic. Had to use some junkyard parts for the prototype. She picked it up again, rotating the wrist joint. This is better than anything we've got in Skunkworks Alpha. Skunkworks, he repeated. Sounds like you've got secret labs straight out of a Bond movie. She didn't smile. We do. 2 of them. Ethan stopped what he was doing. You're serious? Cassandra nodded. We've been trying to develop next-gen prosthetics, real-time neural response, but every prototype fails under stress conditions. Well, Ethan said, Most people build for perfect data. I build for reality. Bent joints, static interference, dust and heat. A soldier doesn't operate in a lab. She blinked, clearly impressed. This belongs in production, she said. Why aren't you working in this field anymore? He didn't look at her, because the last time I did, they stole everything and slapped their name on it. And you didn't fight? I tried. I lost. Cassandra stared at the prototype, her fingers twitching slightly as she placed it back. What if I gave you a team, she asked. A lab, unlimited budget. What would you build? He looked at her, something flickering in his eyes. I'd build something human, he said, something that mattered. A beat passed between them, the kind of silence that wasn't empty but full of questions, of decisions not yet made. Then Cassandra asked, would you do it with me? Ethan blinked. What? If you fixed more than cars, if you still wanted to fix systems, I could use someone like you. He paused. I'm not a company man. She smiled faintly. Neither am I. The Ferrari's engine roared to life like a dragon shaking off sleep. Cassandra flinched slightly at the power of it. Ethan stood beside her with a quiet pride, wiping grease from his hands. Radiators patched, coolant flushed, and I recalibrated the injection mapping. It won't purr like new, but it'll get you wherever you need to go. She stared at the machine, amazed. I had 4 engineers fail to fix this in L.A., she muttered. Maybe they weren't hungry enough, Ethan replied. He handed her the keys. Try not to redline it in the rain again. She took the keys but didn't get in. Instead, she looked at him, really looked at him. The mechanic, the engineer, the man who once had a vision that others buried under corporate greed. Triple your rate, right? She said. Ethan shook his head. I'm not taking your money. She frowned. Why not? Because helping someone in a storm shouldn't come with a price tag. Her face changed, subtle but noticeable. The steel in her gaze softened into something warmer. Her fingers curled tightly around the keys. You don't know what you've just done, she said quietly. Ethan tilted his head. I fixed your car. No, she whispered. You gave me clarity. She stepped closer. I'm not going back to fight for a broken company. I'm building something new, and I want you with me. Ethan blinked. Come again? She reached into her coat and pulled out a card, matte black, with only a name, number, and a logo he didn't recognize. I'll call tomorrow, she said. If you pick up, everything changes. Then she climbed into the Ferrari, revved the engine, and peeled off into the wet night, her taillights glowing like embers fading into mist. Ethan stood alone, staring at the card. He had no idea that the offer would change not just his career, but his very identity. The clatter in the rain had been no accident. It had been destiny. The next morning came too quietly. Ethan sat in his modest kitchen, sipping lukewarm coffee from a chipped mug, the black card Cassandra left lying in the middle of the table like a loaded weapon. He had read the embossed text over a dozen times, even though there were only 3 elements on it. Cassandra Vale, private line, direct access, Obsidian Division, no title, no email, no address, just a whisper of something dangerous and an unspoken promise. He'd barely slept. The weight of her offer pulsed through his chest like a second heartbeat. It wasn't just a job. It was a return to the world he'd turned his back on, a world that chewed people up and spit them out wearing name badges with someone else's name. And yet, the idea of building again, of leading a team with purpose, stirred something he hadn't felt in years. His old drafting notebooks lay in a drawer, Blueprints for ideas too good for scrapyards and too strange for investors. Robotic hands with intuitive grip. AI-controlled prosthetics that mimicked muscle memory. He once believed in making tools that could restore people's lives. That belief hadn't died. It had been buried. The landline rang. He still kept one for emergencies. He let it ring. The voicemail clicked. Her voice, cool and poised, filled the air. "Ethan, this is Cassandra. I told the board to go to hell, walked away from the entire company. They can keep the legacy. I'm building something new, something clean, something real. Obsidian is my lab, fully independent, unlimited budget, no shareholders, no politics, just innovation. I want you there, CTO, first hire, full freedom, no strings." A pause. "If you say yes, a car will pick you up at 3 p.m. Click. He stared at the phone, heart racing. He had been offered redemption. Now he had to decide if he was brave enough to take it. At 2:43 p.m., Ethan was still sitting on the edge of his couch, staring at the duffel bag he had packed and unpacked 3 times. Inside, one clean shirt, his lucky wrench, and a sketch pad filled with ideas, too advanced for the world he had left behind. He had barely touched his garage all morning. The Ferrari's absence made the space feel oddly hollow, like something had been exorcised from it, or perhaps something had simply awakened. He pulled out a photo from his wallet. A younger version of himself standing beside a woman in a lab coat, his former partner, Leah. She had believed in their vision until the funding dried up and the acquisition forced them apart. She'd gone corporate. He had gone underground. He hadn't spoken to her since. That failure had kept him small, humble, hidden, until last night, the image of Cassandra standing in the rain, fierce and untouchable, played in his head like a dream. There had been no hesitation in her voice, no doubt in her eyes. She had seen his potential and offered him a place to thrive, not just survive. Still, part of him whispered caution, the same voice that had kept him safe for years. But another voice, louder now, whispered something else. What if this time is different? At exactly 3:00 p.m., a matte black SUV pulled up outside his garage. He stood at the threshold for a long moment, staring back at the life he'd lived for too long. Then he grabbed the duffel bag and stepped outside. He didn't lock the door. He wasn't coming back. The drive to Cassandra's facility took over an hour, but Ethan barely noticed. The road climbed out of the city and into a forested ridge, winding toward a compound that wasn't on any map. The building emerged like a spacecraft buried in the earth, sleek glass and obsidian stone hidden in the trees. A private lab, secluded, untouchable. The SUV pulled to a stop. The driver, silent the whole way, nodded toward the doors. Ethan stepped out and took a breath. The air smelled like pine and promise. Inside, the facility was everything his garage wasn't. Sleek, humming with energy, flooded with natural light. Engineers in lab coats moved like ghosts through halls lined with glass rooms full of prototypes. Robotic arms, drone swarms, neural network clusters running simulations in real time. And at the heart of it all, Cassandra. She waited for him on a balcony overlooking the lab floor, dressed in black, her gaze locked onto him the moment he stepped through. "I wasn't sure you'd come," she said. "I almost didn't," Ethan replied. "But then I realized staying scared was just another kind of failure." Cassandra smiled, the faintest curve of her lips. "Good, because I didn't walk away from my empire to play it safe." They entered the main lab, where a team of young engineers turned to greet him with hushed awe. Cassandra led him to a table covered in half-finished models and sketches, most of them painfully underdeveloped. "We have vision," she said, "but we don't have you." He picked up a piece, a half-articulated hand, and frowned. "You built this using standard torque channels," he said. "You'll never get natural resistance. The nerve feedback will be short." Cassandra's grin widened. "Exactly." Ethan turned to face her. "You want me to rebuild all of this. I want you to lead it." He looked around at the tools, the tech, the wide-eyed team, and he felt it, that old spark, the one he'd buried, the one that told him he could build something better than what the world had settled for. He extended his hand. "Then let's get to work." Cassandra took it without hesitation. At that moment, something shifted. No longer a billionaire and mechanic, no longer CEO and dropout. Partners, rebuilders, revolutionaries. The line between what was broken and what could be rebuilt had just been crossed, and there was no going back. 3 weeks later, Ethan stood in the center of Obsidian Division's main lab, a whiteboard covered in sketches, specs, and scrawled equations that only a handful of people in the world could understand. But he wasn't alone anymore. Around him buzzed a new team, hand-picked by Cassandra, and soon loyal to Ethan's vision. Young engineers, veterans from failed startups, even a couple of industry rejects with wild ideas. The lab had become a sanctuary for brilliance without boundaries. They called him Chief, which still made him cringe, but he had stopped correcting them. Across the lab, a prototype moved. It was a robotic hand, its frame carbon black, its joints fluid. It picked up a grape from a dish, squeezed it gently, then released it without crushing it. That simple act was something no existing hand could do with such nuance. Ethan grinned. "That's the one." The team erupted in cheers, a moment of victory. Cassandra watched from the mezzanine, arms crossed, satisfaction in her posture. She had given him the tools. He had given her something priceless in return, proof of what happened when genius was set free. Later, as the lab dimmed and the team drifted home, Cassandra found Ethan still working. "You never stop," she said, amused. "Not when I'm this close," he replied. "I've waited too long to quit now." She leaned against the table. "You've built more in 3 weeks than our last CTO did in a year." He hesitated, then asked, "Why me?" Her gaze softened. "Because when I met you, you weren't trying to sell me anything. You just wanted to fix something. And when I saw that prototype hand in your garage, I knew you hadn't given up. You were just waiting for someone to see you again." Ethan swallowed hard. He'd never realized how much he'd needed to hear that. "Thank you," he said quietly. She smiled. "Don't thank me yet. We're launching this in a month." He blinked. "A month?" She grinned wider. "The world's ready. Are you?" For the first time in years, Ethan didn't feel afraid. He felt alive. The product launch wasn't just a press event, it was a phenomenon. Cassandra rented out an art museum in San Francisco, filling it with interactive demos, holograms, and live presentations. The event was streamed worldwide under the cryptic title, "Reclaim Humanity." Thousands tuned in. Dozens of outlets scrambled to cover it. Most assumed it was a new software release, another machine learning engine. No one expected what came next. When Ethan walked onto the stage, plain jacket, no script, prototype in hand, the room hushed. He began with a simple story about a mechanic who once dreamed of building hands that could heal, about losing faith in the system, about rediscovering that faith in the most unexpected place. Then he turned to the demonstration. The hand mimicked human movement. It responded to voice, micro-expression, and resistance. A stroke victim in the audience tried it, tears falling as she flexed robotic fingers that answered her brain's whisper.
The audience rose. Some clapped, others cried.
Reporters rushed the floor. Tech Revolution Daily ran the headline, "The Mechanic Who Rewired Silicon Valley." Wired called it the most human machine ever built. Social media exploded. Ethan's name trended globally. Old colleagues reached out. Venture capitalists begged for meetings. But Ethan only cared about one thing: building more. After the show, as the last lights dimmed, Cassandra joined him backstage. "You've changed everything," she whispered. "No," he said, "we did." She paused. "Do you ever think about how strange this all is? A broken-down car, a late night." He smiled. "It wasn't strange, it was meant to happen." Then he turned to the stage one last time as the curtain fell on the past and opened on a future he never dared dream of. 1 month later, the Ferrari purred smoothly down a winding country road, its engine no longer howling in pain, but humming with precision. At the wheel sat Ethan, wearing a confident smirk. In the passenger seat, Cassandra watched the landscape roll by. Her heels kicked off, her guard down for once. "So," she said, "have you finally admitted you missed this?" "I admit I like engines more when they're not billowing smoke in my face," Ethan replied. She laughed, really laughed, full and easy. They drove in comfortable silence, passing fields and trees, the city far behind them. Cassandra turned to look at him, more thoughtful now. "You know, I had offers from 3 governments to buy the tech after the launch," she said. Ethan raised an eyebrow. "And?" "I turned them all down," he smiled. Because I built this with someone who reminded me what real purpose looks like." She hesitated, then added, "I don't want this to just be a company. I want it to be a movement." Ethan nodded. "Then let's keep building." They stopped at a viewpoint, the sun casting golden streaks over the hills. Cassandra got out, arms wide, soaking in the breeze. Ethan stepped beside her, looking over the horizon. "You ever think," he said, "if your car hadn't broken down?" She cut in, smiling. "I wouldn't have found the only person brave enough to tell me I was wrong." He laughed. She added more softly, "I wouldn't have found the person who reminded me what being human meant." A long pause. Then Ethan turned, unlocking the trunk. Inside lay a sleek new prototype, a compact, affordable version of their hand, designed for children. The next step. Cassandra looked at it, then at him. "What should we call it?" she asked. He thought for a second, then said, "The Spark." Because it all began with a spark of courage, of resistance, of connection. As the sun set and the engine revved, 2 unlikely revolutionaries drove off, no longer escaping the past, but accelerating into the future they chose to build together. Forever changed, and finally free.